Hello everybody, how you doing today? We're here today to do a pretty quick video, really. Kind of just want to talk about some of the conversations that I've been having the last few days with some of the pro-guilty folk, as I say sometimes, the people who believe Stephen is guilty, and the way the conversations have been kind of going lately. And so I want to kind of explain something about where I stand and how I feel about the situation, just because I've had a few of them coming at me with the same argument recently that I'm just like left shaking my head going, really? I mean, you really want, I mean, are you serious? So we'll get to that in a second. So just to let you know where I stand on this, I mean, the reason I will never be able to get behind Ken Kratz's narrative, and I will never be able to get behind it because it's flawed. It's obviously flawed. It's so obviously flawed, it's ridiculous. Okay? He was able to get his conviction. He was able to do that press conference where he basically, you know, talked about all these details from the confession of Brendan Dassey, the confession, the coerced confession that was fed to him, essentially. So the whole thing, the whole story came from the minds of law enforcement, Ken Kratz, whoever else who's involved. But that coerced confession is ridiculous and completely obviously coerced and fed to him. And he went ahead and he put those out in a press conference. You know why? You know why he did that? He did that because he knew he wouldn't be able to use Brendan Dassey's confession against Stephen at trial. Because he knew Brendan Dassey was not going to be, he was recanting his confession already. He wasn't going to be able to testify, and he would therefore not be able to bring the confession in Stephen's trial. So this was his way to make the confession work for him in the Stephen Avery case. That's why he did it. He now says, "Oh, I would have just issued the statement or whatever the charges or whatever it is that he filed or something. He would have just read off the statement." He says that now, but at the time he didn't feel that way because he wanted to make sure he got his conviction, and he was tainting the jury pool. So you take those things together. You take the fact that, here's the next big fact: no blood in the trailer or the garage. I'm sorry, anybody who thinks that this murder took place in Stephen Avery's trailer or in his garage, look, I don't agree with you. I'll just leave it at that. There's no way he cleaned that blood up. There is no way he cleaned up that blood. I'm sorry. Some of you may be willing to have this image of Stephen going between idiot and savant, idiot and savant, and idiot and savant, and that it doesn't bother you, that it seems perfectly plausible to you, but it does not seem plausible to many of us. And I am one of them that it does not seem plausible to. I do not believe Stephen Avery went between idiot and savant constantly throughout the commission of this crime, as Ken Kratz would have us believe it with his narrative. So, what I'm getting to here, those are my two main points. But what I'm getting at here is that I will never be able to get on board with that narrative. That narrative is hugely flawed. Now we move on to the fact that Zellner's experts are actually doing some real investigation and are actually coming up with some very plausible testing and things and theories about what happened. And particularly, there's the blood spatter expert who has basically surmised and given his opinion that the blood stains on the interior door of the RAV4 were cast-off stains because somebody was actually hitting Teresa right there at that back tailgate of that RAV4, and they were bringing that hammer back, and it was throwing blood on to the interior of the door behind them. That is now, and it looks pretty convincing because, you know, this is what this guy's been doing for years. This is what this blood spatter expert's been doing for years. He knows what he's doing. Now, obviously, State gonna find other blood spatter experts to try to just, you know, dispute it. Of course, we'll see what happens. But the fact is, it's quite convincing, and yet it also points out how ridiculous the prosecution's blood spatter expert was in trying to say that it was impact stains from Teresa's hair. They did an experiment trying to recreate that, and they just proved that completely ridiculous. So when you couple all these things together, the case doesn't make sense. There's too many things in it that don't make sense. Okay? So that tells me, so that makes me say to these people, look, if the state wants to go back and revise and come up with a narrative that's believable, that's not the one they currently have, that's a complete farce. If they want to go back to the drawing board and bring out a narrative where Stephen Avery is guilty and it's convincing and they have the actual crime scene, hey, let's hear it. Let's hear it. Okay? And then that's when I get this response that totally blows me away. I get this response from some of them of, oh, well, don't you think that Stephen Avery could still be guilty, but just not the way that the prosecution says it happened? What are you arguing with me? Okay, if you're going to be pro-guilty at this point, and you're going to sit there and go and be like, oh, ha, 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 yeah, Zellner has the burden of proof. Yeah, well, Zellner does have the burden of proof. Okay, so that means that if you're a pro-guilty, then you feel pretty confident in the fact that Stephen Avery may stay locked up for the rest of his life because you know Zellner has a very high burden to meet, right? Are you kidding me when you're trying to suggest to me that maybe Stephen did it, but not according to the prosecution's narrative? Really? Anyways. All I have to say is if the prosecution has another narrative where Stephen Avery is guilty and it actually works, let's hear it. Okay? But the fact of the matter is it better not have happened at Avery Salvage because I will never ever believe any theory that tries to say that she was killed at Avery Salvage in anywhere. I'm sorry, anywhere. I don't care even if it rained. Okay, as somebody else was trying to tell me, there was rain and blah, 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 blah. Even if it rained, the dogs would still be picking up on scents. How many days were the dogs walking around that property? Yeah. So even with that, the dogs would have picked up scent somewhere. I'm sorry. You're going to have to figure out where the actual murder took place because I am convinced it was nowhere on Avery Salvage. And until we can find the real murder scene, I will continue to be opposed to the current narrative. It's not good. It doesn't work. It's flawed. It's highly flawed. Okay? So that's where I stand on that. People, you know, just wanted to get that out there and say that because I just couldn't believe these arguments that I was getting back of, oh, well, maybe Stephen is still guilty, but it just didn't happen the way Ken Kratz said. What? Are you kidding me? You know, that's it. Hey, that's it for this video. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe. But yeah, I hope you guys are all as amused by that as I am.